January 5th, 1994, Natick, Massachusetts. A former Marine has vanished from the home he shares with his girlfriend. 4 months later, his body will be found on the banks of the Charles River, about 5 miles from his home, shot 3 times with a 9mm handgun. But the discovery of the body left his family, friends, and even law enforcement with even more questions. Was it a robbery? Was it someone he knew seeking revenge? Was it workplace related? Or was it connected to a blockbuster movie that released 2 years before? This is A Few Good Questions. Who killed David Cox? Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Podorf. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends in Chile.
Yes.
Bienvenido.
You're really good with the Spanish inflections.
You'd think I'd spoke it before.
Wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitched to Homicide. Then like, rate, and review the podcast so others who are just like you and love true crime can find us. Trying to get it all out. Seriously, hit that button. Give us a review.
Please.
It moves us up in the algorithm and other people can see us and then they'll join the in-laws and outlaws.
And we can make more podcasts.
And we can make even more podcasts.
Yes.
If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. And as I said before, if you want true crime with us all the time, go join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. We've got a bunch of new members. Type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws, answer a couple questions you're in. Go join. Please answer the questions.
Yes, please. They're just 2 easy questions.
There's actually 3, but you can tell Rob didn't set it up, and I have said that before in a podcast.
I just like the number 2.
Apparently. So go join. I post photos and other information in there as well. And this week, you're going to want to see it. It's a great group of true crime folks.
Okay.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee.
Yes, please
or
do.
me a Diet Mountain Dew. I'm drinking more and more. I'm supposed to only have one a day, but let me tell you what. Been having some late nights working.
It's the nectar of the gods.
It is. You can find that link in our show notes. Pepsi, listen to me. I love Diet Mountain Dew. You can also send us a text.
Wait. Nespresso, listen to me. I love your coffee.
My Diet Mountain Dew is way less expensive than your Nespresso.
It's true.
You can send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes where it says, send Chris and Rob a text. We love them. And we've been getting them, and I promise I'm going to read through a bunch of them, just not today.
Okay. Fair enough.
Just not today. I don't want to keep everybody. Everybody gets mad, apparently, when we chit-chat too much at the beginning, although we had an in-law and outlaw chime in our Facebook group and say, I love the chit-chat.
Yeah.
We're just a bunch of friends hanging out, talking about true crime.
There's a way to fast forward through all the chit-chat. We have the technology now.
That's right. Well, next Monday is Memorial Day.
Yes, it is.
And because the day is dedicated to honoring and mourning U.S. military personnel who died while serving in the armed forces, actually the first Memorial Day was established to honor the Union soldiers killed in the Civil War.
I didn't know that.
And it expanded to encompass all military who made the ultimate sacrifice after World War I.
Yeah.
I think one of the more touching things I've ever read about Memorial Day is concerning the Normandy, France American Cemetery and Memorial. It's 172 acres. There are 9,387 Americans who died on June 6, 1944 during the D-Day landings.
That's just amazing.
They are buried on a cliff overlooking Omaha Beach. And what I love is that all the graves face west toward America. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's cool.
And this case is about a Marine who is murdered But there's a twist that Rob is going to find really interesting.
Okay.
Before we get started, let me thank some sources. Boston.com, Boston 25 News, Unsolved Mysteries, Wikipedia, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, IMDb, Reddit, International Journal of Law Management, Collider.com, the New York Times, Variety, and Derek Levasseur YouTube channel. He does a really great breakdown of this true crime case, and the link to his podcast, his YouTube channel, will be in the show notes.
Nice. All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
David Vernon Cox was born on November 27th, 1966. He's born in Boston to June and Arthur Cox. David was the third and final child born. He has an older brother, Stephen, and an older sister named Christine. His family later moved to Needham, Massachusetts. When David was 15, his parents divorced, and while he initially lived with his mom, June, he later returned to live with his dad. He graduated from Needham High School in 1985 and signed up for the Marine Corps with his best buddy, Jay Steeves, under the Buddy program. Do they still have that, I wonder?
I have no
Where
idea.
two of you can go in together and you get to stick together?
I don't know. Bill Murray and Harold Ramis did.
It's true. Both of them were sent to the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in Parris Island, South Carolina.
Okay.
Now, David was known for being very compassionate. He was warm-hearted. He was really outgoing. He was funny. He was a man's man, a guy's guy, loved to hang out with the bros.
Yeah.
He went through basic training or boot camp on Parris Island and successfully completed the program, becoming a Marine. And he's an excellent shot. And David completes the Scout Sniper School. In 1986, he was deployed to the U.S. Naval Base at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, where his assignment involved manning the perimeter of the base.
Uh-oh.
It was a lonely and pressure-filled job.
We're sounding a lot like A Few Good Men.
He's already on to me.
There you go.
Marines on the guard line had to stand and watch for hours on end, and sometimes less than 600 yards away from Cuban soldiers that they didn't get along with.
Yeah.
What is it Jack says? I eat my breakfast 600 yards away from Cubans who want to kill me.
That's it.
While he's at the naval base at Gitmo in Cuba, Colonel Samuel Adams was the commanding officer.
He has great beer, too.
He doesn't look like that Sam Adams at all.
All right.
By the way, it's actually GTMO. Rob probably knows all of this, but I didn't, which was the abbreviation the military used for the naval base. But over time, they called it Gitmo, Gitmo.
Right.
And the nickname stuck. Here, David's a part of Rifle Security Company Windward Side 2nd Platoon, along with 29 other Marines overseen by squad leader Christopher Lee Valdez, who was under the command of Colonel Samuel Adams.
Okay.
David was assigned as this guard along the perimeter, which separated the base from Cuba. And according to David, he belonged to an unofficial group of Marines known as, quote, the 10, end quote, who joined this group by performing exhausting physical challenges such as running with full gear in 110-degree Fahrenheit heat and hanging from a 60-foot tower by hand for 60 seconds.
I think I've accomplished something when I do my 2.5-mile brisk walk every day.
Jeez. These are young strapping boys, honey.
True.
According to David, quote, they only let the best Marines in, the most loyal ones, the ones in the best physical condition, the ones who could keep their mouths shut. We worked directly under the base colonel and company captain. We were out there on the fence lines every day shooting at Cubans, trying to instigate a war, end quote.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, that's not good.
Well, according to David, it was part of their initiation into the 10 to fire at their mirror, the Cuban soldier stationed across from them.
Right.
But not to kill him, just to shoot past them. You got to shoot at them.
Just to tick them off.
Just to say, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
In 1986, one of the 29 Marines stationed at Gitmo, PFC William Alvarado, Private Alvarado didn't like the poor conditions and what he thought were illegal activities on the base, like firing shots across the fence into Cuba.
Right.
So he wrote letters to a Texas congressman, as well as to his senator, President Reagan, and his mama.
Are you sure the movie wasn't based on this?
Oh, just wait.
All right.
These letters received in Washington were forwarded through official channels, which is the standard procedure for congressional correspondence involving military matters. And it all eventually landed on Colonel Adams' desk. And I'm sure he was madder than a preacher's wife at a poker game.
Yeah.
Of course, this information trickled down to squad leader Christopher Valdez, who told the other Marines, and they did not like PFC William Alvarado after this because he violated the chain of command. And even though Alvarado wanted to be transferred, especially after everybody knows he squealed, Colonel Adams did not transfer him off the base. I think it was kind of you dance with the devil so you don't get to gripe because your boots are on fire.
Wow.
According to David, squad leader Christopher Valdez pulled the 10 aside and said, quote, "Don't take him up to the roof and throw him off and kill him. But if he were to fall down the stairs in the middle of the night, oh well," end quote.
Wow.
This is when the order for a code red came down to teach Private Alvarado a lesson. A code red, if you've never seen the movie A Few Good Men, is an unauthorized hazing within the Marines. And according to David, their platoon commander suggested that if we were good Marines, quote, something should happen to Alvarado, end quote. Again, according to David, one Sunday night at 1:30 in the morning, the group known as the 10, including squad leader Valdez, went to PFC William Alvarado's room, tied him up, binding his hands with tape, blindfolded him, and stuffed a pillowcase into his mouth before dragging him into the bathroom where David gets out electric hair clippers and started to shave his head. That was his punishment. They were going to shave him bald.
All right.
But while David was shaving William's head, he notices that something's wrong. William's turning blue. He's not breathing. And David was able to convince the group to stop. And they took the pillowcase out of his mouth and untied him. But William is still unconscious. He's sort of choking. He's kind of spitting up blood. He'd inhaled this rag and his lungs were filling with fluid. These 10 Marines rush to get help, and William is taken to the base's infirmary and then transferred to a hospital in Miami, Florida to recuperate from his injuries. He recuperates fully.
Oh.
And after this happens, William Alvarado left the Marines. There are no widely reported details about his life or his career after his departure from the military, and he did not become a public figure in connection with this case.
Okay.
Now, as you might imagine, somebody's head's going to roll for this.
Right.
The same guy who wrote to Washington and even President Reagan was almost killed during a hazing event for writing the letters. So when the superiors on the base start asking questions, the platoon commander, Christopher Valdez, denies that he ever gave orders to assault PFC William Alvarado.
Okay.
Still, the group of 10 Marines admitted to their involvement immediately after the incident. So after they call for help and they get him to the infirmary, they come clean, and they were all arrested. All 10 of them were initially charged with attempted murder and assault and simple assault. Now, these 10 guys are angry because they feel like they were upholding the honor code of the Marines by following orders. And all 10 of them were offered plea deals because, the Marine Corps just wants this to go away.
Sure.
You don't read about code reds in the recruiting office brochures.
Right.
They want it gone.
Right.
So the deal was no court-martial, where if you were convicted, you could spend 20 years in jail. In the brig, if you're convicted.
Wow.
But the deal is no court-martial, and they were all to be dismissed from the Marine Corps, resulting in OTH discharges, or Other Than Honorable. So not dishonorable, where you lose everything and you're equivalent of a felon.
Right.
So no voting, no firearm ownership. You lose all your veterans' benefits.
Right.
Other Than Honorable is administrative, and it's for serious misconduct, but not criminal. They would still lose most of their veterans' benefits, and it would have a negative impact on them being employed in the civilian world. But it's not a criminal record, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
7 of the 10 take the deal, including platoon leader Christopher Lee Valdez. And one of the attorneys representing the 7 was Lieutenant Debbie Sorkin. That's called foreshadowing.
No.
But the other 3, including David Cox, decided to take their chances at being court-martialed. And David tells his attorney, Lieutenant Don Marcari, that he was following orders when the Code Red was carried out, and he's adamant that he had not done anything wrong. Now, at court, Lieutenant Marcari said that David acted under implied orders from his superiors in their culture of obedience. He only intended to haze William Alvarado, not harm him, and they stopped when he needed help. The charges were disproportionate to the intent and the outcome because he survived.
Right.
And that David's dedication and refusal of the plea deal showed his character and integrity, not to mention hazing was a well-known but unofficial practice that was influenced by climate set forth by his commanding officer. So while it's wrong, it wasn't criminally malicious or murderous, what they did to Alvarado.
Right.
David Cox was ultimately convicted of simple assault, a misdemeanor, and found not guilty of aggravated battery. For the simple assault charge, he was sentenced to 30 days in the brig, but he'd already been there 38 while he was waiting for his trial. It's interesting to me because they go to trial quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. The JAG courts are like, in, out, you're done, you're gone,
Yep,
you're
next.
okay, next, move up. So he walked out of the court still a Marine, and he continued serving in the Marines and was stationed in Panama, South Korea, among other places. And Corporal David Cox was honorably discharged in 1989. So he served 2 more years after this. As for Colonel Samuel Adams, he never confessed to ordering the Code Red. He maintained in official statements and testimony that he did not realize such hazing practices were still occurring and denied giving any direct order for the punishment.
You can't handle the truth.
According to the New York Times, Colonel Adams, who was really well liked, was reassigned, quote, sent packing, end quote, to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, after the scandal. So he's demoted from Gitmo to Camp Lejeune.
Yeah.
There's no public record of Adams being court-martialed or facing formal criminal charges as a result of this incident. But David Cox continues his career as a Marine, serves 2 more years. When he's honorably discharged in 1989, he moves back to Massachusetts, to Needham, and by the time David gets back home, everyone had forgotten about the Code Red and the court-martial. The play and the movie has not been written or made, and David felt no ill will toward the Marines for what had happened, and he still considered himself a Marine.
Oh, yeah. When you're a Marine, you're always a Marine. It doesn't matter how old you are or how long you've been out of service, you're still a Marine. I think that's a very cool tradition that the Marines have.
Yeah, I think most military sort of feel that way, but the Marines are different. They're built different.
They are built totally different.
And we're saying this because both of our fathers served in the military. My dad was in the Air Force. Rob's dad was in the Navy.
Yep, Dad served in World War II, in battle.
In battle.
Yep.
So after David comes home, he moves in with his girlfriend, Elaine Tinsley, in the town of Natick. And for the next couple of years, he worked a few different jobs. He hauled trash, he tended bar. He went to school and earned a 2-year paralegal degree from the Massachusetts Bay Community College. No doubt after his trial, he kind of got, the legal bug. But while David was settling back into civilization, Aaron Sorkin, the now award-winning writer of The West Wing and Molly's Game and The Social Network and Charlie Wilson's War, Moneyball, The American President, Aaron was writing a play, and he titled it A Few Good Men.
You know, I saw that play on Broadway.
Yeah.
And when I worked for Paramount, and we would go every year just to see Broadway shows, just to review them as research and development. But one of the tickets that we got was for A Few Good Men, and I saw that play before the movie ever even came out. It was great.
It ran for 14 months on Broadway.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And Aaron Sorkin's sister, Lieutenant Debbie Sorkin, was one of the attorneys who represented one of the 7 who took the plea deal. And Aaron got a copy of the transcript from the court-martial proceeding and wrote A Few Good Men. And while David is getting his life back together again in the civilian world, Aaron Sorkin's play is on Broadway for 14 months.
Okay.
And in turn, Castle Rock Entertainment bought the rights to make the movie A Few Good Men, starring Tom Cruise, Demi Moore, Jack Nicholson, Kevin Bacon, Kevin Pollak. Great movie.
Yeah.
The makers of A Few Good Men never said the movie was inspired by a true story. In fact, a disclaimer in the film states that the characters and story are fictitious and any similarities to real life are, quote, purely coincidental and unintentional, end quote.
Okay, even though he had the transcripts.
And I'm here to tell you, Aaron Sorkin has another Few Good Men in the works because I saw it on his IMDb. It's going to be on television or streaming somewhere. But after seeing the movie, David was pissed because he believed the movie had been based on his life, his experience. And if I was David Cox, I'd think the same thing. Yeah. There's even a female JAG officer, Demi Moore, who was probably based on Aaron Sorkin's own sister, right?
Right.
According to David's girlfriend, Elaine Tinsley, quote, he was stunned. Here was this movie company that was making tons of money off his story, and if it weren't for him, the story would have never existed in the first place, end quote. Yeah. Now remember, he's kind of struggling. He's hauling trash and, doing odd jobs and stuff. Yep. And even though the makers of the movie say the movie wasn't inspired by a true story, when the movie hits theaters, David and the people who are close to him and those who are on the base and everyone he'd worked with is now going to believe that David and his fellow Marines, who shouldn't have hazed anybody in the first place, well, now in the movie, they've killed him. Yeah. They killed Private Santiago. Right. So he's upset because the movie's version of events depicted him and the others as murderers who were dishonorably discharged. Two things that he found very offensive, especially as a Marine.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was upset that his story had been used, details changed, and now somebody was making a bunch of money off of it. David felt this not only made him look bad, but that it was a violation of his privacy. And there was a lot of argument about how exactly the writers had gotten their hands on the official court-martial's transcripts. Yeah. And now we know. We know how. Right. 5 other Marines who had been involved in the incident, Kevin Palermo, Ronald Peterson Jr., Brett Bentley, Dennis Schneider, and Christopher Lee Valdez, hired lawyer Gary Patterson and filed a lawsuit in Texas state court against Castle Rock and other Hollywood companies linked to the film. Wow. They argued that Aaron Sorkin took the idea for the story from their real-life incident, and they were seeking $10 million in damages.
There you go.
Now, while they waited for a ruling, David really spoke out about the case on radio talk shows. He goes on all these radio shows and gives interviews sharing his side of the Code Red story, along with other experiences that he had at Gitmo.
And I'm sure his attorney advised him to do that. No, I mean, I'm being very serious.
Well, they want to get the story out there. Nobody knew that it was based on somebody's life.
Well, and the fact, too, that when the studios start hearing that he's doing interviews, they're going, listen, we need to quell this.
Yeah, we need to settle. We need to do something. Yeah. Yeah. And at least in one interview, David claimed that his colonel, Samuel Adams, had implied they should be provoking war every day while stationed in Cuba.
Wow.
And David's mama, June, she listens to this this interview, and she calls him up and is like, baby, stop talking. She's worried. She's worried it could be dangerous for him. She's worried he's talking too much.
Gotcha.
And David's trying to get on with his life in the middle of all this, and he's been trying to nail down a good-paying job. He's living with Elaine, and during the Christmas rush of 1993, he worked as a part-time driver for UPS, and he really liked it. And he hoped that after the season was over, he might be able to get a full-time job with UPS. And after he asks his boss about becoming a full-time employee, he's told that right after the year rolls into 1994, after January 5th, he would know if he had a full-time job with UPS.
Okay.
On the evening of January 4th, a snowstorm hits Massachusetts, dropping over 8 inches of snow where he lived, which I'm sure is just any other day
exactly.
up there.
Yeah.
That's a problem where we live.
Yeah. We get like a dusting and all the bread and milk is gone
It's
for days.
true. There's a snowstorm coming. Snowmageddon is happening.
Exactly.
And even though the weather was bad, David's older brother, Stephen, took him out for drinks and to watch a basketball game. I told you, he's like a bro, you know. According to Stephen, David kind of seemed off that night. He wasn't as talkative. He was more reserved, just not himself. And Stephen's thinking that maybe he and Elaine are having problems. Around 10:30 p.m. that night, Stephen dropped David off at home at his apartment in Natick. He will never see his little brother again.
Oh.
That night, because his back was hurting, David slept on the couch. And I read that and I thought, oh my gosh, my back was hurting. The last place I'd sleep is like couch.
Exactly.
But the next morning, January 5th, Elaine wakes David up on the couch before she leaves for work at about 8:30 a.m. She's like, bye, have a good day, love you, honey. And remember, this is the day David's supposed to hear about his job with UPS. At noon, Elaine calls the house. David doesn't answer, so she calls back to get the messages from the machine. And yes, we used to like press a button for a really long time on a push button phone, and it would like roll back all our messages on a little cassette tape and give them to us. And there's a message for David saying, congratulations, you got the job.
Oh, wow.
Now she's really excited for him. She calls home again at 1, no answer. So she checks the messages again, and UPS has called again, kind of like, hey, David, do you want this job or not? I mean, congratulations, but give us a call back.
Right.
Elaine comes home around 5:30 and sees David's 1988 truck in the driveway and is thinking, good, great, he's here. We can celebrate. This is great. But when she went inside, the apartment didn't look right. There are drinking glasses in the kitchen that have been like tipped over. David and Elaine, I thought this was so funny, they had a pet bunny.
No.
They didn't have a dog. They had a pet bunny.
Yeah, it's easier to clean up after.
True. And the bunny was confined to the kitchen. So the bunny had like a little bunny barrier there. And the bunny is roaming free in the apartment when she walks in. Quote, when I came into the house that night after work, I realized right away that the doors to all the rooms were open and our rabbit, who we usually just kept in the kitchen, was hopping all over the place. End quote. Elaine runs out to David's truck and sees that the keys are in the ignition, and there's an uncashed paycheck sitting on the dash. His 9mm handgun was in the glove box. Now, Elaine starts calling friends and family. Have you seen David? No one's seen him or heard from him. And then on the next day, January 6th, Elaine filed a missing persons report. And even though the Cox family pleaded with the media and the police to keep David's name and information out there were absolutely no leads and no tips about his whereabouts. He just vanished.
Wow.
According to Elaine, quote, as the days went on and there was no news from him, we checked his bank account. There was no activity on his bank account. You start to believe that, maybe something did happen. But why? End quote.
Yeah.
It wasn't like David to vanish without a word, and as days turned into weeks, they felt like something bad had happened to David. And as you know from the teaser, they were right. 3 months later, as Massachusetts was starting to thaw, on April 2nd, 1994, a man canoeing down the Charles River near Medfield, Massachusetts, sees a tennis shoe sticking out of some branches on the riverbank. So he pulls his canoe ashore. He goes over to get a better look. He moves a branch away and he sees a body. It's 27-year-old David Cox.
Wow.
Now, this guy leaves the scene immediately to go and find a phone because you didn't canoe with your cell phone back then.
Yeah.
He goes to find a phone so he could call the police. And when the officers arrive, they're kind of amazed how remote the area is because in order to get there, you'd have to travel by water or hike about a mile along the trails through the woods. The police find 3 9mm shell casings, and Sergeant Kevin Shea of the Massachusetts State Police, don't they call them stadies? Don't they call the state police stadies?
I haven't heard that one.
Well, I just know it from the movie The Departed, where they called each other stadies.
Okay.
Everybody had such a great Boston accent in that movie. But this state police officer, he said, quote, he was shot, according to the medical examiner, 4 times, once at the base of the rear of the neck and 3 times in the left side torso area. Based on the shell casings and the way David's body was positioned, the police believed that David had been killed on the riverbank. They believed he turned his back, and when he did, he was shot execution style. In his wallet was cash and his credit cards, so it's not a robbery, and police are thinking this isn't random.
Yeah.
Sergeant Shea believes David left home with somebody that he knew. Quote, it's our belief that he got in the car willingly, that he knew who was coming to pick him up, and that he went to this area and walked into the woods with this person. I think that if it was somebody that was just holding a gun on him or something like that, that they would do it within the first 30 or 40 yards into the woods. David was found almost 3/4 to a mile walk into the woods, end quote.
See, I don't buy that, though. I mean,
there are a lot of people who don't buy it.
Yeah, because, listen, if somebody came into his house
and is holding a gun to his head
and saying, walk, and they get in the thing and they leave and they take him in and no, I don't buy that at all.
Also, what David was wearing was suspicious to those who knew him. He was wearing tennis shoes in almost a foot of snow.
Mm-hmm.
And he would have worn his boots. I mean, he's from there.
Right.
These people are built different than we are in the South. Yep. I mean,
Yep.
It gets below 40 and everybody here is wearing a parka.
Exactly. I remember when I first moved to Kentucky from Charlotte, North Carolina, because in Charlotte, maybe you'd have a ice storm or a snowstorm every 4 years or so, but most of my winters were spent in flip-flops and T-shirts. And my first season here in the winter, I was out in the driveway with a snowblower.
We get all 4 seasons in Kentucky. We have a beautiful spring.
Yep.
We have a gorgeous fall. We get snow in the winter, and it's hotter than the hinges of hell in the summer.
It is.
We get all of them.
Yep.
I think it's because we're right smack dab in the middle.
Yeah, we are.
But he would have worn his boots. And he was also wearing a black Marine sniper hoodie and a camouflage jacket and jeans. And he'd like worn this sweatshirt and then a coat on top. And he's also wearing gloves. And what makes it suspicious is that according to his friends and family, he hadn't worn either of those items, those clothing items, after he'd come home. Because he was no longer active duty. So he was like, I'm not active duty. I'm not wearing this.
Right.
Because, they're very careful, and they should be, about men who steal valor or women who are, accused of stolen valor.
So was the sweatshirt and the gloves, were they his?
They were all his.
Okay.
But he never wore the sweatshirt or the camouflage jacket because he was no longer active duty. That's what they were saying.
Okay.
He wouldn't wear those.
I just want to make sure they were his clothes.
It was all his clothes.
Okay.
But he felt like because he wasn't active duty, he shouldn't have them on, which just means that whole stolen valor thing. I can't imagine how people who've actually served feel about men or women who lie about it, right?
Yep.
Now, there are plenty of theories on what happened to David. Number one, that it was a military retribution and was connected to the Code Red. That David was killed as retribution for his involvement in this Code Red hazing at Guantanamo Bay and his subsequent court-martial testimony, which inspired a few good men. And his brother, Stephen, strongly believes the murder was a highly planned military-style execution meant to send a message, possibly by someone whose career was damaged by the incident or its fallout. But the state police and David's sister, Christine, don't think the military was involved. Investigators say the military angle was thoroughly vetted and dismissed, although there's not a whole lot of information about that.
Well, they've kept the JFK files secret.
Until now, right?
Exactly. So I don't know how much I believe in that.
Theory number 2, that it was a Hollywood film lawsuit connection.
That's where I was going to think.
The murder was connected to the legal dispute with the film studio behind A Few Good Men. And at the time of his death, David and others were suing the studio for $10 million for using their story without permission. Mm-hmm. And some have speculated that his death conveniently ended the lawsuit and that the murder was staged to look like a military hit to misdirect suspicion. Mm-hmm. But there's no direct evidence linking the film studio or its representatives to the crime, and this theory is largely based on circumstantial timing and speculation.
Right.
Number 3 is that his murder was related to his UPS workplace.
What?
David had apparently reported or noticed suspicious activities and mentioned concerns to his brother. Some people were taking packages during Christmas. Stephen referenced that David had spoken out about, quote, shady stuff, end quote, at work in the months before his death. But no evidence has emerged connecting UPS or its employees to the murder, and this theory remains unsubstantiated, just like the others.
That one kind of makes me laugh. Okay, somebody's stealing Christmas presents, so let's whack him.
I mean, if it's somebody pretty high up in UPS, you know. Again, nobody wants to send stuff through UPS if they think that their personnel are stealing it.
Yeah, but all they'd have to do is say, listen, we've identified the people who are doing this, we've fired them, and it won't happen again.
Agreed. But as a former PR person, I'm telling you, that's a public relations nightmare.
Okay.
This is a public relations nightmare for everybody.
Yeah, true.
The movie, the military, UPS, you name it.
Yeah.
Number 4 is that there was some sort of personal motive, somebody close to David. The killer was somebody that David knew and trusted, maybe a friend, an acquaintance, or somebody from his past. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle in his home. There were some knocked over glasses. Police and his sister Christine believe only somebody close to David could have convinced him to leave his home and put on this rarely worn Marine jacket and walk into the woods in inappropriate footwear after a snowstorm.
I don't know. A 9mm up against my head probably would convince me to do whatever you want me to do.
Yeah. But no specific suspect fits this profile and has been publicly identified, and that motive also remains unclear.
Okay.
Number 5, random drug-related robbery. Early speculation included robbery or random violence or even a drug-related motive. Some initial rumors suggested drug involvement, but police quickly ruled out robbery and drugs as David's wallet and cash were found on his body.
Yeah.
There's no evidence supporting a drug connection, and random violence kind of seems unlikely given the execution-style nature of the killing and the secluded location.
Right.
There was another theory that was that David owed money to his bookie, $1,000, but he had over $3,000 in the bank account. And, you know, bookies like their clients to be alive, right? So they can play more and keep paying them. Yeah.
Right.
Dead men can't pay up.
Right.
I listened to a podcast on this case by a retired police detective, and I think he's a private investigator now. His name is Derek Levasseur. The link to his podcast is in the show notes. It's fascinating because he gives his take on the homicide from a detective's perspective. And he says, quote, I need to know if there was gun stippling. That would suggest how close the shooter was. What was the trajectory? Was it going from up to down or down to up? Was it straight on? Why wasn't he shot in the head? If it's execution style, why wasn't he shot in the head? Because he was shot in the neck and the side.
Yeah.
If it was an execution, why wouldn't you shoot him right in the head to ensure that he was dead? And if you were to believe one of the theories that this may be connected to a scorned military member, you would think they would be more accurate, end quote.
Right.
All good points.
Right.
So let's think about this. He was excited that he was going to find out about this new job, but his brother said he wasn't himself the night before. Maybe he was just worried he wouldn't get the job. His keys were in his truck and his paycheck on the dash. And one of the things that Derek talks about is, what if he went out, he just threw on a coat, went out, had his gloves on to start his truck? and left his keys in there because he had his paycheck there, like he was going to the bank or something that morning.
Sure.
The house was a little disheveled, so was he caught off guard? Was he jumped? And why the clothes that he never wears? I actually think he was caught off guard. I think he was asked to put on those clothes. You put these on.
Yeah.
And I think he probably already had his jeans and his tennis shoes on when they got to him. And I think he was forced at gunpoint to the edge of the river. And I think that it wasn't an execution-style killing because he's tried to fight them.
Yeah.
He's a Marine
Exactly.
who stood on the wall in Gitmo. I don't think he's afraid of much.
Right.
But if he's got a gun to his head, just like you said, when he knew it was going to be the moment they were going to kill him, he fought back. And that's why the shots are in the side and in his neck.
Right.
Many think he knew his killer. Maybe he did. Why wouldn't he fight at his own apartment instead of waiting until he was by the riverbank? Think about that.
Yeah.
In 1996, Unsolved Mysteries ran the story, hoping to help with leads, but there was nothing, and the case went cold. And then 25 years later, in 2019, two Stadies, who were both former Marines, Sergeant John Fanning and Trooper Yurli Buchanik, sorry if I screwed that up, Yurli, they decided to re-examine the homicide because, quote, it's exactly what you said, you never leave a brother behind, end quote.
Yeah.
They looked into every lead, studied all the evidence, and couldn't make a definitive connection to anything. David's brother still thinks it's retribution for the Code Red and Gitmo because the careers were affected by people.
Yeah.
One thing's for sure, it was carefully planned, and it's still an active and ongoing case. So if you know anything, or you might have been in the area or spoken to someone who said they know something, the Massachusetts State Police want to hear from you, and you can call them at 617-593-8840. But that's the story of David Cox. A few good men, a few good questions, lots of questions. But that's all I have to say about that. For nearly 7 years, Jane Doe has lived in the shadows, her past buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and silence. After completing more than was asked of her in her last assignment for the enigmatic Kywolf project, Jane Doe vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of dead bodies and unanswered questions. But now, as the specter of her past returns with a vengeance, Jane finds herself thrust back into a world she thought she'd left behind forever. When her former sins come knocking on her door, Jane is faced with an impossible choice: continue to hide in the shadows, or once again take up arms against the forces that threaten to tear apart the fabric of society. With enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Jane must rely on her wits, training, and her unyielding determination to survive. And while trust is a luxury she cannot afford, Jane must confront the truth about herself and her past. As the clock ticks, she realizes that the line between family, friend, and foe are razor thin, and in the end, the only person she can rely on is herself. Jane Doe 4 Charlotte is available September 24th, 2024. No name, no regrets, no mercy.
Well, here's my take on all of this, is that I think, this is just my opinion, is that it's awfully coinky-dinky that the lawsuit was dropped immediately after this execution.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, listen, I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but it's just, it just seems so weird.
It's very odd because there are two different people who had grudges with him.
Yeah.
And it was all over the Code Red.
Yeah.
So it could have been military. It could have been Hollywood. It could have been a friend, you know.
Yeah.
You just never know. Who was the sniper, American sniper? I can't remember his name, but, you know, he goes through all of this. He gets home and then he goes to a gun range with a guy and gets shot.
Yeah.
So who's to say? Who knows? Who knows what it could have been?
Well, the end result is this is actually the perfect crime.
It kind of is, but I really hope at some point it is solved for his family's sake.
Yeah.
And, this is a guy who, gave his service to our country, and he deserves better than this. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, it's kind of sad, especially when it involves the military.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, Anyway, let's move away from that.
Okay.
I want to get in a better mood and do some stupid crimes.
Okie doke.
All right, with a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, number one, I'm calling What a Circus.
You talking about our house? Kind of sounds like our house.
Yeah. In a dramatic and bizarre attempt to escape police, a man in downtown Vancouver spent over 45 minutes swinging from an overhead cable above a restaurant while throwing bricks and shattering windows below.
What?
The impromptu acrobat even took off his shirt mid-stunt, turning his aerial antics into a performance no one asked for. Unmoved by offers of help, the man eventually slipped while trying to reset his feet on another cable and landed on a strategically placed fire truck. Police promptly took him into custody and transported him for medical evaluations. You think?
They didn't have one of those big trampolines out there, like running this way, that way, trying to catch him?
He just landed on the
It's
top
not
of
a
the
Bugs Bunny episode, is what you're telling me.
Exactly. All right, number two, she's a man, baby.
Okay.
A man suspected of stealing a boat in Florida tried and hilariously failed to evade capture by dressing as a woman.
It's Pee Wee Herman.
Exactly. Deputies found the alleged thief sporting a light blue feather patterned dress, a white cardigan, and oversized sunglasses, but the disguise didn't fool anyone.
It really is Pee Wee Herman.
It is. I'm sure he watched the movie and got the idea. He was arrested near Lakeport, not just for the stolen boat, but also for 2 warrants and the theft of a John Deere Gator.
Did the fashion police get him too? Couldn't help myself.
Thank you. I'll be here all week. Deputies also found other items they believe may be stolen and are working with Seminole police to determine if they're tied to additional crimes.
Okay.
Yep.
Shoplifting.
That's it. All right, number 3, and finally. Marco Polo.
You didn't let me say it.
What?
You should say Marco, and I get to say Polo.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
Marco.
Polo.
There you go. You can tell none of this is pre-rehearsed. In a bizarre game of hide and seek, a Florida man, we're in Florida, wanted for multiple felonies, was found folded inside a dryer.
What?
Folded inside a dryer by Escambia County deputies.
How big is this guy?
The man, described as looking guilty, embarrassed, and warm, was pulled out one limb at a time, along with dryer sheets, mismatched socks, and a wrinkled Star Wars shirt.
They had room for all of that, the dryer and him?
I'm sure it was in one of those laundromats. You know how big those things are.
I guess.
Yeah. The felon, who previously served 7 years for various crimes, was taken to jail on a $120,000 bond. While the sheriff's office had fun with the quirky arrest, they reminded everyone the charges remain allegations, free of static cling, of course.
Good one, guys.
It is. It's pretty good.
That's a good one.
Well, there's your dumb crimes for the week. Bless their hearts.
Well, if you have a bless your heart, or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, I still can't believe, I don't care how big that dryer barrel is. You can fit it there.
Yeah, well, Pee Wee Herman could.
All you got to do is go to hitchedtohomicide.com. When you get there, there's a pull-down menu, and while you're there, you can also suggest a case or tell us about your brush with true crime. It's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.